Hello comic lovers, welcome back to another episode of Comic Fridays. I'm Kirk-Robinson and I'll be taking you through some tips on starting a comic if you want to get online, and also this week's news and a review of the final comic of the year for 2000 AD, which is Prog 2014. Okay, the first thing that you want to do when you're starting a comic is to have an idea of your characters. So sketch out your characters. Basically, we want a personality for each of the main people. We'll want a look and feel for each of the main people. We'll also want the basic settings for where they're going to be. This is the basic premise of your comic. So let's say we're going with a standard newspaper comic, just as an example for this part. Let's say we want a wacky person, because you want someone to play jokes with. You want a straight man to be a counterpoint to the wacky person. And you'll want some other person who sometimes works with the wacky person to create a double-barreled jape, or sometimes to side with the straight man for that kind of flip around. And if you can hear a buzzing in the background, that's because of my computer over there. I'm apologising for that now, it will keep going. Now, you can do all kinds of things with this. So let's say we had an office drama with those, or perhaps they're on a space mission. I don't think you can set it any way you want, but the setting needs to be reasonably developed so that you have an idea in your head of how jokes will work out and whether jokes that you have an idea for will work in your comic or not. But don't go too far with it. You don't need to have everything intricately worked out so that you can tell when the building that they're living in was developed, if it's ever been haunted in the past. That might be a plot point, might not. You don't need to know it if it's not going to come up. Just remember, the first mistake that a lot of people make when starting out with a comic is to over-plan. So what I'm saying is, yes, if you want the place to be haunted, that will come up later, make a note of it. That's perfectly fine. You can do that. But don't have to have all of that history of that plotted out. Just leave a note in the margin and move on, because it's not going to be important right away. Now, once you've got your character sketched, the first thing you should do then is to write out a few sample comics. Now, what I like to do with this is just a stick figure type of set out. So plan scene, plan scene, plan scene, plan scene, whatever, however many frames you've got. And write it all out, write the dialogue out, and see if the characters that you've got an idea for work with these jokes. Perhaps 5 comics will do it for your sketches, maybe 10. When I was doing All Over the House, when we were first planning it, I actually wrote out 35. And it took a while, but it gave me a real idea of what the characters were like. So once you've done that and you've got the idea, do your characters work? If they do, great. If they don't, it's time to go back to step 1. Now you have to refine your characters based on the jokes that you've already written and seen that you can write. Do your characters work? Yes, but they need tweaking here. Or no, they don't work at all, so we need to totally get rid of that character and bring in a new character that will work with what we've actually written. Refine your characters, and then another set of sample comics. Now, does the character work? Does the setting work? Does everything seem to fit together? If it does, fantastic. If it doesn't, then tweak it again and just keep going until you're certain that you've got it right. But, and this is the big but, because a lot of us have made this mistake, do not get stuck in the refinement cycle. Just say it to yourself, right, I've done this, and I've refined it, and I've done it, and I've refined it, and I've done that 3 times. They're as good as they're going to get. If they don't fit, we'll work on it on the fly. Do not get stuck in the cycle that I ended up in when I took time off from my first comic, The Life of Naughty Mouse. I was doing my A-levels because I was going to go to university, and I decided it was best to leave them aside for the moment, do the A-levels and come back. But when I came back, I wanted something really good as a way to come back with. And I couldn't get it right. It didn't look right on paper. I had a brilliant idea in my head and I couldn't get it down on paper. And it was years before I decided that, you know what, I can't keep doing this where I'm saying, I've got this idea but it's not right there, so I've got to tweak this and I've got to tweak that and I've got to make sure this bit works. But to make that bit work, I've got to add something over here and all of that. You can't let yourself get into that because you will never get the comic out there. And I know this from experience because getting from Series 1 of Naughty Mouse to Series 2 took almost 8 years. And it took some serious prodding from the person who is now my wife to actually get me to just say, right, this is as good as it's going to get. It's not going to do everything I want it to. I'll have to take some plot points and write other stories later. And that's what I did. And a lot of Series 2 is actually the plot points from Pie Noon that didn't get into the actual Pie Noon story. But I got it out there and I got over that block. You've got to get over that block too. So I say, if you're stuck in the refinement cycle, after 3 attempts, just go with it. Wing it, see how it goes, and change characters as you go along. That's the best way to do it. Got your characters, you've got your setting. your sketched out example comics that you did, they seem to work quite well. So now we're going to take those sketch comics and we're going to make actual comics from them. You want to put together at least 2 weeks worth of your comic before you go any further. So let's take the sketch comics that you had and we're going to write them out and we're going to draw them properly with the characters and settings that you've developed. Get them out there on paper with your frames or out there on computer if you're going to work totally digitally, and see how it looks. Now, they won't be perfect. This is the first of your set of comics. This is the first time you've actually written them out properly and drawn them out properly. So they're not going to be perfect, but they're going to be your comics. Now you have some starting comics. This is great. Don't stop there. The next thing is to put them online, but don't put them out all at once. Set up a schedule. Say you're doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's a very traditional starting schedule. Or if you know that it's going to take you a lot longer to produce a comic than would let you really cope with Monday, Wednesday, Friday, shorten it. Perhaps 1 or 2 a week. All Over the House, my most popular comic, started off with 2 episodes a week. And that went on for quite a while. And then we decided we'd make it 3. And now it's up to running Monday to Friday. But we started out slow and saw whether we could do it and developed. Do the same with yours. Go at a pace that you know you're going to be able to keep up with. Because while those comics are going up on your schedule, you should be writing and drawing more comics. So the first set that you've just produced to get your ideas right and get comic developed are actually going to be your starting buffer. This is the best time to have a buffer, and it's the best time to develop one. So get one together before you actually start publishing. That's a big mistake if you don't do it. So now you've got that up, keep going. Don't look back. This is the main point. It stops a lot of comics straight off. They don't look as great as all of the really established ones. It does. You look at your comics and say, well, that's not like Penny Arcade, is it? Or that's not like whatever favourite comic you have. Of course it's not. Have you seen what those comics were like when they started out? No. You've seen the first ones that went up online, but you haven't seen their starting sketches. You haven't seen how they developed. A lot of them, it's just not there anymore. Or if it is the ones that are still there, they're not great compared to what they've got now. Don't compare yourself to people who have been doing this behind the scenes and online for a lot longer than you have. It's a big mistake. It will demoralise you, and a lot of people stop because their work isn't as brilliant as everyone else's straight off the bat. It's not going to be. You're going to develop over time. So don't look back. Keep producing more content and put it up and schedule it so it comes in after the work you've already got up scheduled, and then you too will have a comic and you can be proud of it. So just go at it and see how you do. Okay, we're going to move over to comics news now, and there's not a huge amount of news. It is December, people are slowing down and getting drunk because it's the holiday season, but we have got a little bit of something. We have the Schuster family going back to court to try and get rights over Superman. I really don't think this is going to work out for them. I'm sorry, but they've had judgment after judgment about this, and the fact is, those rights were signed over decades ago, and now is not the time to be trying to get them back. I feel sorry for them. Yes, the creators of Superman did get shafted quite badly by what was then Action Comics, but at the same time, what can you do? This was a long time ago, and nothing's going to change now by going over the same material again and again and again. Unless they've got new evidence that the contract was void at the time, then I really don't see this going well. But I suppose they're not going to take no for an answer, they're just going to keep at it, and I do feel sorry for them, but what can you do? On slightly better news, the Rebellion Developments company, which owns 2000 AD, has brought out a festive free issue of 2000 AD. I'm going to put a link in the description bar so that you too can get a copy if you want. It's well worth having a look at, it's pretty good stuff. So I say, yay for free comics, yay for 2000 AD, because 2000 AD is pretty good, and free 2000 AD is even better. Okay, the final thing I want to talk about is this new pirate comic that's supposed to be coming out next year called Anne Bonny, and it looks amazing. My only problem with it is it's got a lot of male gaze in it, and the main character is incredibly thin, so it's falling into standard comic problems with women territory straight away, but it looks pretty good. The art is really nice, and I'm looking forward to seeing a couple of issues, see how it goes, but again, it is a problem of male writer and male artist doing a woman who is incredibly young and incredibly thin and incredibly sexily drawn. But what can I say? That seems to be the problem with comics everywhere, and it won't go away anytime soon, but I'll give it a try, see if the storyline is actually going to raise it up a bit from that, but it does smack a little bit of Tomb Raider the comic. But maybe that's just me. Okay, that's really it for the news. Like I said, there isn't a huge amount of news going on at the moment, so there's not much we can cover. So I'm going to go straight over to the mega review we have of 2080's end of year massive comic. It's 100 pages. We're going to go straight with it. Now, we're going to move over to Dread, and this is where the comic proper starts. And my goodness, Michael Carroll is on form here. This is a good story. It's a lot of fast-paced action. It runs and runs and runs, and you know where it's going by the end of the comic. But when you get there, it's actually really welcome. It's one of those endings where it's like, yeah, I expected that, and it pays off quite nicely because I expected it. The artwork is fantastic. It's Lee Gallagher on form, on really good form, with Chris Blythe adding a lot of good colour. It looks amazing, and I like the way that Gallagher's managed to take the standard comic version of Judge Dredd and mix it a bit with the film version of Judge Dredd, the modern film, not the Stallone film. And he's created something that looks really good. Dredd is very angular in his uniform. It looks imposing. It looks like something that you would wear as protection. It looks good. My only problem is he's added detailing down the front, but it doesn't look right. Because it comes down the front, and then it goes down the middle of his legs, and then the rest of it is standard comic. It's like he's done a half and half on the uniforms. He's chopped and sewn them together. It doesn't really work for me. If he'd had the detailing go round the rest of the uniform as well, so it looked like something that wasn't just stuck on, then I would have preferred it. But as it is, the majority of the uniform works really well, but that little bit just didn't really work out for me. But having said that, there are lots of good jokes in this. It's good fun. The background details are immensely fantastic, so even though we've got this one comic that's supposed to last for 3 weeks, you're going to enjoy looking at the artwork. Next up is Ulysses Suite by Guy Adams, with art from Paul Marshall and Chris Blythe again, adding grayscale this time. I'm sorry to say, this is the disappointment out of the comic. There's usually one thing that goes wrong, and that's traditional in an anthology. It's not going to hit on everything. And this, unfortunately, is it. There are no likeable characters in this story. I'm sorry, but it's an idea of a psycho for hire. It's just Zombo all over again, but it's the problem you have of basically a knockoff. It's not as good as the original. It wants to be Zombo, I can tell that, but it's not. It's not funny, the characters aren't likeable, the artwork is good, but the comic goes nowhere. Next up we have The 10 Seconders by Rob Williams and Edmund Bewell, and I'm sorry, this really feels like an epilogue that should have been attached to the end of the last storyline that we had a while ago, rather than anything else. It doesn't really work on its own. But having said that, it's a sweet tale. It's nice. It runs fairly well, but nothing happens. And that's the problem. Something should have happened. This could have been done in 1 or 2 pages, stuck onto the end of a previous episode. As a standalone story, just doesn't have enough going on in it to really hold your attention. The artwork, however, is very nice. It's very workable. The chunkiness of it works really nicely. It looks good. And that's pretty much all it's got going for it. I'm sorry. Having said all that, now we're getting to the meat of the matter. It's the ABC Warriors. Now, Pat Mills is on great form with this one, and Clint Langley is on superb form with his artwork. This is the best artwork in the comic right now. Clint Langley has really struck it with the ABC Warriors. They look fantastic, they look chunky, they look like warriors who could survive an apocalyptic war. It is amazing, and Pat Mills has this fantastic way of plucking the heartstrings when you're talking about machines created to kill. But this machine is looking back on the abuses that it's had during the war, and it's feeling sorry, but it knows that things have to go on, and it is amazing. It is, without doubt, one of the better stories of the comic, and I recommend you have a look at it. So when you turn the page and find Sinister Dexter by Dan Abnett, it's a bit of a shock, because Sinister Dexter is a comedy and an action film. It's like if Quentin Tarantino came to comics, he would write Sinister Dexter, although he wouldn't, because Dan Abnett would punch him for copyright infringement. Well, maybe he wouldn't punch him. You get the idea, it would already have been done. It's a brilliant comic, and I love Sinister Dexter, so I was really happy to see them again. This starts out a bit oddly. We have a bit of new plot, and then we have a bit of a catch-up. Or, if you haven't read the comic before, this explains what's going on. But it's done in the form of dialogue, where everyone is telling everyone else in a car everything that everyone in the car already knows. So it takes you out of the comic a little bit, But you have to do it because people need to catch up and need to be reminded of what's going on. So I can understand, and it goes over quick, and then the comic itself starts. And this is great fun. It's action-packed, it's well written, and it keeps you wondering what's going to happen next. So I really, really recommend it. Now, the artwork for it by P.J. Holden and Dylan Teague is very good. P.J. Holden has a certain style that you recognise straight away. It's slightly cartoony, but with a lot of detail, and I do love it. I'm not sure it really works for Sinister Dexter with the events that are going on in this particular story, but it's really good artwork nevertheless. And Dylan Teague has done some amazing colouring work on it. It looks fantastic. So, yes, it doesn't quite fit with the story, but it's really good artwork nevertheless, so you can forgive it, because it's really good to look at. Going to move on, and we have Absalom. Now, this one is like, wow. You look at it and think, this is going to be a story that I want to read. It starts off with a bit of mystery, and then it's a bit of action, and then it's a detective nostalgia thing, and then it goes straight into pulling the heartstrings so hard. It's amazing. Normally when you have genre shifts of that style, it's not going to work, but this works so well. So Gordon Rennie has been on top form with Absalom, and I can't wait to see what happens next. I mean, we're going to have to, because it's not a story that's going to start straight away. It's like a preview, but wow, I want to see where this is going. The artwork by Tiernan Trevelyan, it's ugly. It's got lots of detail, but the characters in it are horrible. Everyone in it looks a bit like a monster, even the humans, but the style fits so well with the story that, you know what, it's not meant to be all the pretty people versus the ugly monsters. The heroes are monstrous as well to a certain extent, so everyone is ugly, and it shows up in the art so well. I love it. It's so fitting. It's rare that you get something that just really enhances the storyline to that extent, but he's done it here, so wow, well done. Look, have a look at this. If you get a chance, have a look at this artwork and read the story. It's so much worth your time. If you're wondering whether we've got through the comic yet, no, we're halfway through. This is a big comic with a lot of stuff in it. The next one we have is another from Dan Abnett. It's called Grey Area, and my goodness, as a standalone story, it makes you want to see more. It's developed a world, and it makes you really feel for the problems that migrants have when coming into a new country, or in this case, aliens have when coming to Earth. It's so inhuman and devoid of humanity. It doesn't show off any of the good parts of the place that you're looking to go to. And wow, it really makes you think. So, I looked at this and thought, I wouldn't mind seeing a lot more of this. A lot more. Not just one extra comic or a couple of stories. I want to see the rest of this world. What is so good or so bad about this world that anyone that wants to come into it has to go through this kind of inhumanity? The artwork by Patrick Goddard and Abigail Ryder is fantastic. It's chunky. The characters in it feel like you could pick them up because they've got a real chunky 3D-ness to them, even though it's drawn. And it's all just great. It looks good, it feels good, it reads well. I really love this one. This issue of the comic is really on top form, and this is one of the excellent standout examples of good writing, so fantastic. Now we have to look at Tharg the Mighty. Now, every single prog for the end of the year, as they call them, it's got to have a Tharg story in it. Tharg is the alien editor of 2000 AD, and every year he does a comic. It's a special one-off. Usually they're either comedy or just zany and you can't understand what's going on. This year they've gone for comedy, and it is actually really funny. I was really impressed. It's apparently written by the Mighty One himself, but you know it's the editor, or someone who's writing under a pseudonym, pretending to be the alien editor. And this year it's drawn by Anthony Williams. It looks really good. There's a fantastic use of shadow to give depth and kind of intensity to the artwork. It's really good artwork. The comedy, it's good, it's funny. I think if you're new to the comic, you're probably not going to get a lot of what's talked about. But at the same time, if you're a regular, it rewards regular reading. So have a look at yourself and make your mind up. I think regular readers are going to love this, but newcomers are going to like some of the jokes but miss an awful lot of it. Okay, the final story in this massive prog is Trontium Dog. It's the start of a new storyline of a continuing story, so it's like episode 4 of a long-running series. and it is really, really good. When you have John Wagner and Carl Siscera working together on the same comic, you know it's going to be good. And I'm happy to say they don't disappoint. This looks fantastic. It's got a grittiness to it that Siscera always brings to his artwork. You know it's going to be grimy, it's going to be dirty, it's going to be real. It's like the difference between the old 50s style sci-fi and Star Wars or Alien. It's that kind of griminess that makes it real and makes it feel right. And John Wagner knows how to write a gritty action story. This is good stuff. It's not the Johnny Alpha that people have grown up knowing and loving, however. After he died a long time ago and got resurrected, he's come back wrong. A lot of his heroicness is just not there. And now he's a gritty, driven person, hell-bent on saving the mutant population. And my goodness, it is good stuff. It's different, and some people won't like it, but I think it's actually going to work out really well. So I'm looking forward to seeing the next part of this, which will unfortunately be in a few weeks' time, because the next issue isn't out till January, but oh well, what can we do? It's Christmas, we just have to wait, so I'll probably end up rereading this a few times. But anyway, that is 2000 AD, Prog 2014. It's out now until the start of January. It's available now online or in newsagents, and I recommend you have a look at it. You can find it at 2000adonline.com. Okay, that's really all we've got time for today, so thank you very much for watching. If you did like this, remember to click the like button, share it with your friends so that they can see how to start a comic, get some news, and see a very good comic just dissect it, even though it's 100 pages. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. I've been Kirk-Robinson, you've been watching Comic Fridays, and I'll see you next time.